Hi, my name is Scott Slaughter, and this is Scott Talks, and I am sitting with Myra Flynn today. Um, it's crazy. I loved your conversation with Laura, by the way.
Thanks.
Um, yeah, and it's funny. I feel like I have so much in common with you, only because my kids grew up in Stowe, and
Mm.
I grew up on the East. I mean, on the not grew up. I grew up on the East Coast, but that doesn't matter at this point. I lived in L.A. while they were growing up in Vermont. So my
Oh,
kids grew up in this very homogenous community, and then they would come here and be with Laura and our family, and it was just this crazy dynamic for them. I could see them struggling with this, like everything is one way from this world, and then they would go back to their world and be like, "What? This is weird." And they would try to tell people how weird it was, and they would get a lot of resistance about how
mm,
myopic sort of their views were, and sort of how linear their perspective was on certain issues and stuff. And ultimately, I think it became a really good thing for them to have uh, experiences in multiple environments like that. One of the stories that came to mind while you and Laura were talking was when I went to take pictures at my oldest daughter's
Oh,
graduation.
yes. I was going to make sure you told this.
Yeah, we're in this auditorium, and it's a community, and all the kids are up there. And there were so many white blonde-headed kids, I could not find my kid on stage to take a picture. I was like, oh my God, which one is mine? And it dawned on me at that moment just how sort of like a fish in water, like you don't understand you're in water, until you come out of it. And like I was just blown away. Like I was almost embarrassed that I couldn't find my kid. But I had this realization of like, for me, I am most comfortable in areas and rooms with a lot of diversity, and with more diversity than that for sure. Contrastly, when I went to Laura's son's graduation in Sierra Canyon over here in LA, it was the most diverse 400 people I'd ever seen. Like
Yeah.
you literally could not find two people of the same race standing, or maybe two standing next to each other, but for the most part, it felt like the America I think of, like this melting pot, true melting pot of people. Um,
Yeah. You
and
turned to me and said, "This is America.
yeah, I was almost
This is
welled up
America."
with
Yeah.
emotion. Like, um, I think I was, and I was comparatively seeing it through the eyes of the dad who couldn't find his kid on stage in Vermont. And the reason I bring this up is Myra grew up in Vermont. She grew up in a biracial family. She tells stories on her podcast called Homegoing, and of what it's like to be Black in America. I think is I don't want to reduce it to too much of something, but I I wanted to ask you, growing up in a biracial family, a couple of things. What were the benefits for you at this point in your life? Like, what did you see from your Irish father that you loved, and your Black mother that you think other people didn't get to see
mm.
in their experience that makes you part of who you are today?
Yeah, I think just how like this is gonna sound so uninteresting, I think, but just how like normal and mundane, you know, interracial love is and can
Mm,
be. We just weren't freaking talking about it.
right.
Like I have never in my lifetime talked so much about race until these last 4 years.
Yeah,
Um,
I sense that is probably the experience where you just experience it as a person in
yeah,
a family, and then you
yeah.
walk out into the world and you go, "Wait, you guys don't see it the same way?"
Yeah, or I don't know. I had this really sweet situation with them at home where because they never made a big deal out of it, they weren't letting me make a big deal out of it. And it's
Hmm.
really hard to explain that, Scott, like what I mean by that. It's just to say that, so for instance, I know quite a few biracial people that had such a radically different experience growing up than I did. And then reporting out the biracial conundrum episode was hugely eye-opening for me because that tug, that push and pull between the Black and the white world, it makes a lot of sense because historically Black people and white people have been the two most opposing races. So what do you do when you put both of those in one body, right? It's got a lot going on, but that wasn't what was going on in my household.
Right.
In my household, if anybody was conforming to any one side of things, it was my father. to Blackness.
Mm.
And so
I get that,
do you
actually.
know what I'm saying?
I do,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I come from the South. I grew up in
Mm.
Virginia, and I found myself at 40 years old a part of Laura's family. And on Sunday nights, it's 12 Black people talking about what it's like to be Black, and I'm the only white guy. And for a while, I was a little bit uncomfortable. But I found that sort of, adapting, learning, and coming to listen more became the journey. So I totally get you. And it's interesting that you got to see that for him. You got to see that possibly he
Right.
was aligning himself with your mother's culture.
I think
Uh,
maybe white men and how they are not all like that
mm-hmm.
has been one of the bigger surprises in
Oh,
my life,
interesting.
because
Yeah.
I grew up with a white man who would not have not only tolerated any pain going, in the direction of his girls or whatever, racially, but never made it a point to split me. He never split me.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so to learn that white men, when I would like date them later or hang out with them later, would be like, you're really pretty for a Black girl, or like these things, and that they're not all like my dad. I think that was a pubescent lesson to learn for sure.
And your dad was Irish, you said.
Yeah,
Which
very
I love.
Irish.
I have a lot of Irish friends who are, I'm like, oh, you're definitely, there's no question,
Yeah.
where you come from. Yeah, I love that. And I love the stories about your family. I think that was where I was most intrigued, just listening about the
Thanks.
dynamic, because I think the goal of storytelling, and it feels to me like a lot of the storytelling you do is a lot of what we do, which is really just to bring things into the light so people can make a choice about how, and they can find their humanity in stories and other people's stories. And I think I really enjoyed listening to you talk about just being a kid in a family, being loved, and being, aware of that you were of a generation that was a little different than your families, and giving them that space and loving them. I told Laura at some point that I felt like, because my father, we had this whole story about my father meeting Laura and her being Black and wondering how that was going to go, kind of thing. And it went really well, just so you know.
Yeah, I'm
But
guessing.
the fact that it had to be an issue was something that I feel like my generation doesn't deal with as much, but it was normal for where my father came from, or the idea of it was normal. And I remember thinking, this racism thing is it's not a quick fix. It's like, it feels like to me that it doesn't begin to change until a family is directly sort of exposed to something that's uncomfortable, and there's love involved, like, so if my dad loves me and wants me to be happy, he has to look at how he makes a stance on this. And sometimes that takes a long time. It's not like, I think a generation can just decide, hey, we're going to be cool with this, right?
Right. I mean,
Yeah. Do you find that in your
yeah.
experience in telling stories and talking to people that, it's a constant push and it's never done, and you can make steps forward and get steps back?
Yeah. Um, Gosh, what do I feel? I feel like it's this like wound,
Mm,
this like American wound
yeah.
that sometimes we like get out the Neosporin and try to figure out a way to heal it. But I think the problem with that is most of the way, like when we say society in America, we're talking about white society, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Period.
The one that was set up for me.
Right. And so a lot of that, even the Neosporin, is steeped in white supremacy. And that's always a little triggering, that phrase, when you say it, like as if there's like white supremacists like that are out there trying to, it's like, no, it's the mentality. There's a lot of things that come with white supremacy. And a big part of that is like this puritanical, uber religious way of like dividing tasks and how we tackle hard things, and this kind of perfection worshiping. And, once we check it off the list, it's done. And that's like not how wounds heal. They need like careful and consistent tending to, and and like forever, and they're going to backslide. And it's like the worst wound ever, right? It's our greatest shame in America is what we did with slavery. And so I think the more we try to be like, all right, this is what's going to do it, and we enact like one new policy out of like the 5 million that need to be created, the less we're paying attention to like the massive lobotomy that like would be needed for that to work, right? We would need an entire system overhaul. And that's not how it is. So really, you know, journalists like me, we're called like soft skills reporters. So instead of being like hard news, you know, breaking news, you know, the fires, the floods, the politics that are happening right at the moment, we're soft skills. And so we tend to do more storytelling and to tease out greater themes from, you know, one person's story. But after George Floyd's murder, I think a lot of us with soft skills became the hard news reporters in a way, because
I agree.
You know, nobody was really figuring out how to talk about humanity as much. And so I think the storytelling that we're doing, Scott and Laura, like, it's important and relied upon more than ever.
Well, I think that's the beautiful thing about podcasting is we get to tell the stories we want to tell. It doesn't have to be, you know, sort of put into a program, if you will. And one of the questions I have, because I do believe that America, you know, has changed since George Floyd's killing, and I wanted to just pick your brain to think to ask, where do you think we are? Like, how do you think we've changed as a society since that cultural awakening that occurred around 2020? Are we getting somewhere, or
it's really tough to say, because as Laura and I were talking about earlier, a lot of the massive benefits and the massive changes that we could track that would allow somebody like you, Scott, or like my own dad who has said it, to say like, everything is different now, and can't you see like it's getting better? A lot of those successes have backslid as we are learning that people are moving on to the next trauma. So I think actually 2024, 2025 is the years to these are the years to pay attention to, as far as what change sticks, because change isn't change if it doesn't change. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I feel like it's much slower than we ever want it to be to quantify it. And like you said, like it takes a while to sort of see how it's going to heal, and I don't think it'll ever heal.
I think awareness is the biggest change that I can see.
Yeah.
Which is just sad, because it's like murder equals more awareness. It shouldn't take that.
Oh, and it seemed like after George's murder that, you know, many things were being tested, many ideas, many things that people had done were getting thrown out there and getting slapped down. And people were like, you can't do that. You can't say that. You can't be that. And it felt like a real, I don't know, learning time for people who had been unaware that there was any difference, or that they were God damn it, I'm forgetting the word. That they were of the majority. You know what I mean? Like that they had mistaken their awareness, I guess. I don't know. I said that wrong. Kaylin, you're going to fix that up a little bit, if you don't mind. But I do think it was a learning time for a lot of people. I know it was for me, because, you know, I remember when George was killed, and, you know, I walked into Laura's office and I had no words, you know. She was devastated, and I couldn't fix it. And none of the experience I had was going to make anything better. And I literally I think I came up and just hugged her and held her for a minute. And it was a tough time for all of us, but, you know, I've been watching the Olympics, and I've had a really enjoyable time with a lot of the way it's been presented and the athletes that are representing the world. Right now, I feel like it might be a place of healing for us a little bit, for humanity at large to experience something. Do you watch the Olympics at all? Are you
So I call all sports sport.
Okay.
So that's where you probably want to ask someone else. I'm so sorry. Call me unpatriotic or something. But
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just watch it because it's on, and we enjoy the backstories, I think, to a lot of the athletes. So
no, I hear it's a popular thing. No, I'm just.
That's pretty cute. Yeah. Well, Myra, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for doing what you do. I'm a new follower on your podcast. Yeah, again,
this is how we get you.
Yeah. That's right.
We come on your show and then get you on ours.
Yeah. And keep up the good work, man. And
thank Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
wow. It's really great. I think you all should have a show just based on your sweet dynamic as a couple. It's been really cool just to observe you. Like my reporter brain has been like, you two need a show too.
That's
Yeah.
cute.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me all.